Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Alex, and thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it. We will start, I believe, with a call to order. So this meeting has begun at 11:33 officially, and wanted to welcome everyone, and begin with introductions. So I will start. My name is Manju Kulkarni. I am Executive Director of AAPI Equity Alliance and co-founder of Stop AAPI Hate. And I am a designee of former Speaker Rendon. I'll turn it over to Angela.
Great, thank you, Manju. Good afternoon. I am Angela Sierra. I'm an attorney with the California Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Enforcement section, and I'm Attorney General Rob Bonta's designee on the board, and also a co-chair of the board along with Andrea Guerrero. And very happy to be here today and looking forward to the discussion. I will turn it over to Captain Green.
Good morning, Captain Darren Green, California Highway Patrol. I am a designee of Commissioner Chandari, and I cannot see who's next. Let's see.
Can our DOJ staff help? And I believe I wanted to welcome some of our new members, but yes, Alex, please.
I think that the only member of the subcommittee who hasn't yet reported out is Board Member Menson.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kevin Menson. I'm the police chief here at the Chino Police Department here in Southern California. Recently been appointed or placed on the board as a representative from the California Police Chiefs Association.
Welcome. Are there any other folks, Alex, or is that it for our subcommittee for the moment?
I don't see any other members of the subcommittee, but we have established quorum, so we are
great.
Ready to go.
Thank you. So next on our agenda is the approval of the May 21st, 2025 meeting minutes. Even though we do have a new board member, my understanding is that board member, Kevin, you can also vote on the board meeting minutes. You don't have to abstain. Is that correct, Alex?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct, yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so can, sorry, a DOJ staff member help us with the vote on the meeting minutes?
Certainly there needs to be a motion on the floor that is seconded, and then I'll take the roll.
So do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes? Captain Green?
I motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Great. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Terrific. So we have a motion and we have a second to approve the board meeting minutes.
Thank you, Co-Chair Kulkarni. Motion on the floor to on the table, excuse me, to approve the May 21, 2025 minutes of the post subcommittee meeting. Board Member Green.
Aye.
Green, aye. Co-Chair Kulkarni.
Board Member Kulkarni, aye.
Kulkarni, aye. Board Member Menson.
Aye.
Board Member Menson, aye. Board Member Sierra.
Aye.
Excuse me, Sierra, aye. The motion passes. Thank you.
Great. And I see that Co-Chair Vieda has joined also. Just wanted to let you introduce yourself, Ronnie, before we move on.
Of course. Thank you, Manju. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Ronaldo Vieda, pronouns he, him, his. recently reappointed by the Attorney General. Thank you.
Thanks. So next on our agenda, we have updates by Board Member Sierra.
Yes, thank you very much, Manju. I just wanted to give an update on our continued work with the Post Commission. And as the subcommittee knows, this year we're continuing to build our relationship with Post, who, as you know, part of our mission, we work closely with them in that we review training and provide recommendations on training that Post certifies and other matters that Post is involved in that impact the topic of racial and identity profiling. And both Post and our board has really made a concerted effort in the last 12 months to just increase those communications and work together so that, our belief is that as working more closely together, we can be far more effective as a team and have a strong partnership. So in addition to in the past, we have reported both co-chair Andrea Guerrero and myself, our meetings with the executive team at Post. I wanted to report that tomorrow, both Andrea Guerrero and I will be appearing before the Post Commission. They're having a public meeting in Huntington Beach, and we are on the agenda. And they have a very full agenda tomorrow. So we have been allotted 10 minutes. And what we are preparing to do is, we're at a very unique time right now in our work. So we have, we issued our report last year. The Post Commission has reviewed the recommendations from last year, has already voted on those recommendations, which we are discussing in this year's report, or likely will be discussing in this year's report. And we're not yet fully decided as a board as to what our final report is going to be and whatever recommendations we may have as a board that may be pertaining to Post. So we thought this is really a great opportunity to, though, appear before them, be available to answer any questions on some general issues. And really the idea is looking forward with the hope that before the commission does take action on any recommendations that we may have, that we will be invited again and that we can be there to present and to answer questions. So tomorrow, likely what we'll be doing is giving the commission, there may be some new members, and just kind of a quick overview of our RIPA statute and our mission, particularly as it pertains to our working with Post. Some observations about our previous reports that some key kind of points that have come out of those reports, and then some discussion updates of the work that we are doing this year. So we are really very happy and pleased that we'll be appearing before Post. And again, I just think that whatever our two agencies can do to enhance our partnership is really great for our mission. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. And at our next meeting, I can report back as to what happened at the commission meeting.
Great, thank
it.
you. Do we have any questions? Thanks so much.
Just to be
Welcome.
clear, this is Ronnie speaking. So it's just like a general overview, kind of report back to the Post Commission and like a reminder of the statute and where we're at in our, I guess, working relationship in terms of collaboration.
Yes, and an update on the topics that we have been working on this year.
Thank you for the clarification.
And again,
Right.
if the commissioners have any questions, it'd be a great opportunity that we'll be able to answer those for the commission.
Terrific. Thank you again, Co-Chair Sierra. Seeing no questions, we can move on to updates by the Department of Justice.
Good morning once again, everybody. We do have an update from the Department of Justice. This is what we had put together is a presentation from the two consultants that DOJ has retained for the post section of this year's report. As the board members have seen in the draft report and the understanding of the 2-year project that the post section is going to be taking on is a review of the post field training program that occurs for individuals who are post-certified law enforcement officers who receive training in the field training program. So this is the last program that this subcommittee has reviewed. Post has presented a number of courses that this subcommittee and the board generally has reviewed over the years. This is the last one for the subcommittee and for the board to assess. And it's a large one, very, very significant portion of the training for any law enforcement officers. So the subcommittee and the board are taking a 2-year approach to review the materials that the post subcommittee and the board are going to be reviewing. So this is year 1, and we have 2 of our consultants today, Rebecca Hetty and Chief Hahn, who are going to be giving a presentation about the work that they've been doing and the vision for next year's report.
Alex, will you cue up the slides for us, please? Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you. Chief Hahn and I will introduce ourselves briefly and give an overview of what we will be doing this year and next. Chief Hahn, would you like to begin with introductions?
Sure. Good morning, co-chairs and the rest of the board. My name is Daniel Hahn. Just real quick background, I grew up in Sacramento. I was adopted at 3 months old, grew up in a community that was very challenged by violent crime, drugs, gangs, and I might add a distrust of the police. I did not want to be, I never thought about being in law enforcement, nor did any of my friends. But then I spent 34 years as a police officer, with the last 11 as police chief in Sacramento and Roseville. I teach implicit bias and history around the country, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. And I'll turn it back over to you, Rebecca.
And I'm Rebecca Hetty. I am a Stanford-trained behavioral scientist. Until recently, I was a full-time academic at Stanford University. I spent the last 11 years working directly with law enforcement agencies in California on various research and training initiatives that were all designed to improve police-community relations, to reduce racial disparities, and to help make policing practices and policies more equitable and respectful. I'm particularly passionate about law enforcement training. I've developed a number of trainings specifically tailored for specific police departments. And as Alex said, Chief Hahn and I are serving as subject matter experts for California DOJ to assist the RIPA board in conducting a course review of the field training program. Once new officers graduate from the basic academy, they are required to complete the field training program. As Stephen Crawford of Post shared at the previous Post subcommittee meeting back in May, the field training program can be considered part 2 of the academy. Trainees are expected to harness the theoretical learnings of the academy and to apply them in the field over a minimum of 10 weeks or 400 hours. The RIPA board has the authority under state law to review and to analyze the training courses certified by Post for the purpose of assessing the effectiveness of those trainings in eliminating racial and identity profiling by sworn officers. As such, the board will be reviewing only the portions of the field training program that are RIPA related and thus which fall under the board's legislative mandate. Next slide, please. The field training program must equip new officers to carry out the many facets of their jobs, including engaging respectfully and building trust with the diverse communities they are sworn to protect and serve. California Penal Code 13519.4 reinforces this need by requiring that training and guidelines for all peace officers in the state, quote, shall stress understanding and respect for racial, identity, and cultural differences, and development of effective, non-combative methods of carrying out law enforcement duties in a diverse racial identity and cultural environment, and shall include adequate instruction on racial identity and cultural diversity in order to foster mutual respect and cooperation between law enforcement and members of all racial identity and cultural groups in basic training. In conducting this course review, a guiding question is, how is the field training program educating new officers across the state about what is expected of them under AB 953 and California Penal Code 13519.4? Next slide, please. And to begin to answer this question, we began an initial gathering of information, which Chief Han will tell you more about.
Yeah, so we wanted to go over a little bit of the information that we gathered and reviewed as part of our work so far. So I'll go over some of those materials on the next slide, but to begin with, we developed two short summaries of learning domain, or LD 42 and 3. These are two of the learning domains that are covered in the Basic Academy that are some of the primary material directly related to racial and identity profiling. So these were created to assist you in the review of the field training program, again, as it relates to the racial and identity profiling. If you recall, if you've been on the board for several years, you might recall that this board provided recommendations for LD 42 and LD 3 in the student workbook back in your 2022 and 2023 reports. We also conducted field interviews of law enforcement agencies and with Post. And I might add, all agencies and Post were very gracious with their time and information during these interviews. The purpose of the interviews was to really understand what currently takes place, the current process of field training, both provided by Post, the information, the materials, the training materials that is provided by Post, but also how is this training conducted in the various law enforcement agencies. So we interviewed small, medium, and large law enforcement agencies. And the reason for that is it's also important to remember that Post provides the training programs for 503 law enforcement agencies across the state, everywhere from agencies that have a couple of officers to agencies that have thousands of officers. So the training has to be applicable to all of those agencies. And we also developed a rubric for the board's use in reviewing the field training program, which Rebecca will go over in a minute. You can change slides. So just some of the material that we reviewed: AB 953, Penal Code Section 13519.4. As I mentioned a minute ago, both the learning domains 42 and 3, they are quite lengthy, which is why we provided the summaries for you. But you also get provided the whole learning domain if you see fit to read the whole thing. And then also the Post Field Training Program Volume 1 and Post Field Training Program Volume 2, specifically Competency 6. You can go to the next slide. So we wanted to spend just a few seconds on these forms to just kind of talk to you a little bit about how these forms are used in the field training program. So the first form is the daily observation report. And this is exactly the way it sounds. It's filled out daily. The field training officer fills this out on what he or she has observed with the trainee during that day. So they're completed daily. There are standardized evaluation guidelines that are often referred to as SEGs in the appendix of the Post Field Training Guide Volume 1 that I mentioned ago. So there are guidelines of what the field training officer is supposed to review when reviewing the trainee's performance for that day. And also there are other pages to this form. There are narrative pages that come after this first page. For example, if a training officer gives the trainee either of the extremes, either a 1, unacceptable or a 7 superior, they have to write a narrative of why they gave them those extreme ratings. And so there are some other narrative pages to this where they can document further a call or those extreme ratings. You can go to the next slide. So
Actually, may I ask,
Yes.
apologies, can we go back to the last slide? If you can just make it bigger, just so that we could see a little bit more for perfect.
So
Thank
if
you.
you see on this form, I'm glad you said that. If you see on this form, number 6 is relationship with the community. And then you can see number 6, that is one of the sections that pertains to racial and identity profiling, that if you looked at the standardized evaluation guidelines that the training officer reviews, racial and identity profiling is mentioned there. So you can go to the next slide. So this is one of the other primary forms where a trainee's performance is evaluated. This is found under volume 2 of the training program guide. And this is a little different than the daily observation reports in that this is completed one time typically. It can be completed more than once, but it is required to be completed one time during the trainee's entire training. So once each category is filled out, it doesn't need to be filled out again. There are 18 different sections that are evaluated, everything from officer safety to ethical standards to community traffic to the community relations to professional demeanor. And section 6, specifically 6.4, is related to racial and identity profiling. And this, on this form, if you look at the top, and I don't know if we need to make it larger, Alex, or not, but at the top, so there's not a separate appendix with standardized evaluation guidelines for this one. The guidelines are listed at the top of each rating category. So if you see at the very top, it will give some information to assist the field training officer in evaluating the trainee. But probably the most important distinction between the two forms is this is filled out one time during the trainee's 4 to 6 month training program, and the daily observation report is filled out every day that the trainee works. So the agencies can also add information down at the bottom of this form. So there's 2 sections, Part A and Part B, where the agency can add policy that's specific to that agency, and the agency can add additional information. And there's often additional training, additional information that agencies provide during the field training program. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Rebecca to talk about the rubric and the evaluation process.
To date, the RIPA board has reviewed 7 post-certified courses. In focusing on the field training program, board members have a unique opportunity to review a particularly consequential and indeed formative part of a police officer's training. Post and individual law enforcement agencies alike recognize its importance. According to the Post Field Training Program Guide, it is, quote, the most effective influence on the future direction of a department, end quote. Many of the board's previous recommendations have aimed to create department-wide and broader cultural shift. Field training is a crucial piece of making such shifts. Additionally, Post has stated in its written response to the board's recommendation that the field training program provides the most effective way to evaluate the trainee with respect to racial and identity profiling. As part of the field training program, field training officers have tremendous influence on shaping the behaviors of basic academy graduates. Field training officers are uniquely positioned to practice racial and identity profiling prevention because they educate officers when they first hit the streets. And in particular, for members of the board with a law enforcement background, reviewing the field training program ensures that your lived experience and your expertise is brought to the table. And Chief Hahn can make a more compelling pitch about that than I can, but know that you are encouraged to participate. So please let the DOJ team know if you are interested in taking part. Next slide, please. To help structure the process, we developed a rubric to make the board's course review of the field training program more systematic. The goal is for board members to fill out the rubric and for that form to guide them as they review and make ratings of the various written materials, such as the Daily Observation Report and Competency 6, which Chief Hahn went over. Here is an example of what that form looks like. The rubric contains multiple dimensions, including, for instance, the adequacy of the training to aid compliance with Penal Code 13519.4, continuity between the basic academy and the field training program, and the extent to which the training is outcome-based. Within each dimension, there are more specific rating tasks. Board members, the form also offers a chance for you to go deeper and to identify what you think might be missing from the materials, and to also highlight what you think is already working well. The aim is to help the board collect your thoughts, which will potentially become formal recommendations to post and the legislature. Today is meant as a high-level overview. For board members interested in participating, we will have a chance to go into more detail about the rubric and the materials that will be reviewed. Thank you for your time, and we in the DOJ team are happy to answer questions about the course review.
Thank you so much. So folks, thank you, Board Member Sierra, for asking the first question.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you both for that presentation. That's really, really helpful. I have a number of questions about the forms, but I think that's maybe more at a high level right now. And so one general question I have is, for those of us who do participate in the review, will that review include either reviewing your notes of the interviews that you have conducted, or will there also be presentations? Do you anticipate presentations from small, medium, and large law enforcement agencies about how they are using these forms, you know, to kind of be like, to help kind of inform what we are reading in these forms?
Yeah, we're still discussing the details with DOJ. I don't know, Alex, do you want to answer that question?
I'd be happy to. Yeah. So the concept in terms of board review is of the materials that Post had provided. You know, we want to make sure that the materials that the board members review is directed specifically to the information that Post has identified as being applicable to all law enforcement agencies. So there were the consultants had consulted with law enforcement agencies to kind of understand the scope of how the training is conducted as it applies to the material the board will be reviewing. But the board's review and particular board members who are participating are going to be looking at the materials specifically, not to other things that Post has not identified as being applying to all law enforcement agencies.
I see. So if we have questions about like the process, like for example, on the first form, you know, how does the field training officer provide that input every day to the officer, that they're the trainee? Questions of process, our consultants will be able to access our consultants to kind of provide that information that we may need, I would imagine.
That's correct, and it may be, obviously, if there are board member questions that require us discussing things with Post, of course, we can also talk to Post to try and get more information if board members need it.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I believe we have a question, and I apologize for missing you earlier, Board Member Ford. Is that right? Please go ahead.
No problem. Board Member Wade Ford. It's okay to be, overlooked. I'm the youngest of, quite a few kids, so it just happens.
Thank you for your understanding. Listen, apologies.
Of course. Chief Hahn and Ms. Hetty, I really appreciate the information. It's encouraging to see the work that's happening behind the scenes that are affecting what's happening in front of the scenes. One of the questions that jumped out, and is probably more detailed and somewhere that I'm just not privy to or did not see. But in terms of um, the field officer that's doing the daily evaluations, I guess one of my curiosities would be about the care that is taken to those particular officers as they become aware with their own unconscious biases, right? So I'm assuming that that naturally affects the evaluation in and of itself. So that would be one of my thoughts as to how is the field officer actually chosen to be the evaluator for the trainee who will then go forward, which of course is a big critical part of the process, and just so curious about that small portion of it.
Yeah, maybe I can try to answer some of that. So the field training officers are just like all officers. There's required racial identity profiling classes that they have to take. They also go through additional training for field training officers. But typically in departments, they are selected to be field training officers. So some departments have different processes, but they have to go through like an interview process or some sort of process. So it's not just something like a patrol sign up where they sign up for an open spot. They have to be selected in departments. So the departments create their own selection, how they do that. But yeah, there's a process that they go through to become a field training officer, and then they go through extra training.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I guess I have a question. It might be too broad for the conversation we're having, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. So one, thank you, and I appreciate the work you guys are doing as consultants for us. I think it's great that we're going to have like a standardized process, I guess, to kind of evaluate and give feedback. And we have somewhere that it's going to live, right? It's going to be centralized for us to look back and reference over the years. So I appreciate that. I guess my question to you all is, where do you kind of see opportunities or gaps for us to be able to shift the culture? Because I understand that POST develops the curriculum, but it's up to agencies, right? How they implement that curriculum, specifically for the field training program, right? And selecting FTOs and all that good stuff, right? So I wanted to kind of lob that out there. If you guys saw anything there, or if anything kind of jumped at you, because what we don't want as a board, right, is for the accountability and what we're trying to push as a board through our recommendations to affect the curriculum and its effectiveness within the community, to get lost in translation when it does go to an agency, right? And that's where I'm a little afraid of it, because POST does not have a say in agency how it gets implemented. So what are some safeguards or potential ways that we can start to kind of think about our recommendations in the sense of creating those guardrails so that FTOs have that on the ground as well? It might be too broad though. I don't know. I'm thinking a lot of things now that you guys gave this presentation.
Well, as you identified, that culture certainly matters, and that's a tension with POST, that they're there to provide guidelines, but for many things there is no one size fits all perfect answer. But POST has power in saying what the minimum requirements are. And of course, as the chief said, departments can always go over and above that. But one guardrail is if the board feels a particular topic related to RIPA matters is of the utmost importance, then that's a conversation to have with POST, that material at the very least should be provided in the materials potentially. So that's one way to approach this.
And also,
yeah, I think it's important to. Go ahead.
I was just to remind the board. I know that all the subcommittee and board members have made recommendations in the past, not just to POST, but to law enforcement agencies as a whole. And some of the recommendations that may come from this field training program may be appropriate both for POST, but also for law enforcement agencies to implement. So I know that has happened in past past sections of the RIPA report, and so extent that there are recommendations that the subcommittee has that would like to advance to the full board that are to law enforcement agencies and not just to post, or both. That's certainly within the power of the subcommittee and the board to do so.
Thanks for that, Alex.
I had a question, which may be similar to one that I had raised in our the earlier presentation that you all had done for the co-chairs, and that is how many of the agencies use the field training and what is done for those agencies, how, in an effort to ensure consistency and uniformity, we certainly want all of the agencies to use this and to use the rubric, et cetera. What do we do about that issue to the extent that not every agency uses it, and then not everyone, perhaps within every agency, goes through, what are the circumstances in which they perhaps may not go through the training, and then how do we essentially ensure the behaviors that we're seeking?
Yeah, I would just say that, as I mentioned earlier, there's 503 agencies in California that use the post field training program. And again, they're different in the sense that some might be 3 officers versus a large agency with over 1,000 officers. So those are differences in how police work is done in those cities. But I don't know of any that don't use the material that we presented. That doesn't mean that there's not. But if any agency that modifies their training or uses some other form or any of those sort of things, they still must submit it to post to be approved. And so there's still oversight of that. And so if they did want to use a different form, I guess, they would have to submit that form to post to be approved.
Got it. Thank you. Board Member Ford?
How do you track progress? And let me back up, maybe there's a pre-question to the question. Is there a baseline eval? And then to see how the training has affected change and or progress?
Chief, I think you're better suited, but can you clarify what do you mean by progress of the trainee from when they enter the basic academy or at the beginning of the field training program?
So I see that you have the daily evaluation, right? So I guess the question that was in my mind pertaining to the training is there a tool that you all use to assess progress? So let's say somebody in their initial daily evals in the early part of their training is not necessarily scoring as many 7s as I'm sure each department would really love, right? Is there a way to manage or track how the training is affecting their daily evaluations as to the long-term trajectory in the right direction, maybe?
Oh, my apologies. I thought you meant progress in terms of the data collected. My apologies. So 7s are rare, I might add. But those dailies are all entered. Most departments do them electronically now. Both the field training officer fills it out electronically and the trainee signs it electronically. And so it's tracked in the computer system. And so they have to progress to the next phase of training, which means they have to get at least acceptable marks and everything. And if they don't, then they get remedial stuff. They might be in a phase longer than normal. They might have to do extra written material. Just depends on what it is they're not meeting standards on. And just as a general rule, you'll see at the beginning of training when they're in the first phase, right out of the academy, they get low marks in everything, just about, because they haven't got the experience yet, and so their marks tend to go up, or should go up, as they go through training. But it's tracked because they can't move to the next phase until everything is checked off and acceptable.
Thank you for that. Perfect.
So just to clarify, there is like no pre-assessment or post-assessment to kind of see the progress made. It's just like, here are the dailies. You got to meet this criteria and pass this threshold. If you don't meet the criteria, you're sent to like a remedial kind of makeup class, or you get stuck in a phase until you pass that section of the assessment to then move on.
Yeah. If they don't go to the next phase, they get released. So they only have a certain amount of time to be at the acceptable level. Many departments also use a written test at each phase to test in a written form your knowledge, and you have to pass that test in order to go to the next phase.
But I think you're hitting on something important. And in my life as an academic and a researcher, we always say you have to measure what matters. You can't track progress on something you don't collect in the first place. So for the board members to pore over what is in those forms and what is not.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Great. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca and Daniel, for the presentation and this information. It's really, really helpful, I think, to our work at the post subcommittee. So appreciate that. I think if we're ready, we can move on to the other part of the DOJ update. If there is anything else. Otherwise, I know we also have the post training and recruitment sections of the draft report. Alex? And then, yeah, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair Kulkarni. Yes. The next section of the meeting is discussion of the draft report. The DOJ presentation was the update that was in that particular agenda item.
Great. And I saw that board member Ford, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I failed to get it up in time. I was just going to ask the question to the support team that provided that presentation about the amount of people that fell out, and if that's a thing, or do they, like No Child Left Behind, kind of get moved along? But I think I'm a little bit too late for that question. But that was my question: if people fell out, right? Then, anyway.
Well, if they're still on and can answer that question, that would be great. Or Alex, if you also know the answer. Chief Han?
Yeah, what was the question again?
So
You're muted.
Yeah, you're muted. Yeah.
thought I was beyond those days. My bad. I'm assuming naturally there's a high level of investment that is put into each officer's training process. So by the time that they get to do those dailies, right, the evaluations, there's already been lots of time and money, taxpayer dollars, that have been put into the process of preparing them for the community. So my question with that level of pressure that's already there, built and baked in, do people fail out? So do people fail out? Do the daily evals, does the trajectory ever go in a way that there's just no, I'm a pastor, so forgive the words, there's no redeeming them? Are there people that you all in the data shows that they end up failing out?
Yes, so people fail out at every portion of the training process, from the academy even before that, with background to the academy to the field training program. So yes, people fail out. Now, there's different things that they fail out for. So if somebody just fails out because they just are not able to, for whatever reason, grasp like things that are unique to a police officer, but they are great employees, they're great for the profession, then a department might find another position for that person, like a community service officer or some other professional staff position, or they might fail out because they just, for other reasons that they wouldn't be a good employee anywhere kind of thing. So yes, they fail out at all different portions of the training process.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question and for the answer. We'll now move on to the report draft. So if we can have the board discussion of the post section of the draft 2026 report. So I'll ask our DOJ team if you can start us out in terms of what's covered in the report, and then we can have our board discussion.
Thank you, Co-Chair Kulkarni. Just to give an overview of the report, the draft report, as the subcommittee knows that this is the second draft and hopefully close to final draft in terms of the post subcommittee. That's part of the meeting materials that had been distributed. There are a couple of different sections to it. I'm going to let my colleague Marisol Leon go over those sections, and if there are any questions or other feedback, I know that some of the questions and some of the feedback that we've already received in terms of the field training program, we're taking copious notes to make sure that this is integrated. So thank you so much, and I'm going to pass it off to Ms. Leon.
Good morning. Good afternoon now. I'm going to share my screen so that it's easier for you to follow within the draft report that was circulated. Can you all see my screen?
We can.
Okay, perfect. So as we stated in the introduction, the first section of the report is going to review the prior recommendations that the RIPA board made to post in the 2025 report. And in the second part of the report, we're going to provide an overview of the RIPA board's participation in two separate workshops. In 2024, RIPA board members and Cal DOJ staff participated in AB 953's workshop on guidelines on racial and identity profiling. And earlier this year in March, RIPA board members and Cal DOJ staff participated in the AB 443 workshop to develop a definition of biased conduct that would then be used in hiring practices and whenever IA complaints allege racial profiling or biased conduct. And as discussed in the report, these workshops are important first steps to effective training on the law's prohibition on racial and identity profiling. So that's why we go in depth into both workshops. And then the third part of the report talks about the 2-year review of the field training program that we already discussed, and that our consultants and experts went over earlier today. So just to give you a visual of what it'll look like, the second report after the intro, or the second part of the report after the intro, is a response to RIPA's to the RIPA board's 2025 recommendations. We talk about, we highlight the recommendation, what post responded, and we actually just learned last week that in terms of the guidelines that we recommended that the RIPA board recommended rather that tomorrow during the post commission meeting, they will be voting on approving those guidelines that will apply to all courses that impact the AB 953 mandate. So here is the section on the workshops. We talk about that workshop on racial identity profiling guidelines. And again, tomorrow the post commission will be voting on them. We also added a couple of sections here related to questions that the RIPA board has raised consistently over the last few years. One of those issues is, how does POST measure the effectiveness of its trainings? And while the RIPA board understands that POST does not hire specific peace officers, and that makes it difficult to assess the effectiveness of the trainings, we have some suggestions in terms of guidance that it could issue to various law enforcement agencies to measure the effectiveness of courses using behavioral and performance metrics. And these are some suggestions that we include in the report. Administering pre and post course assessments to evaluate individual officers' understanding of relevant laws, implicit bias, and procedural justice before and after a course. A second suggestion is to administer attitude surveys to measure changes in attitudes towards race, identity profiling, and bias before and after the courses. A third suggestion is that in trainings, have newly assigned officers respond to hypothetical policing scenarios that reveal bias awareness or decision-making. The second to last suggestion, in trainings, engage in body camera footage analysis by reviewing random samples of interactions that showcase respectful language, tone, and de-escalation practices. And lastly, monitor for shifts in the number and nature of citizen complaints related to racial profiling and bias policing. And all of these suggestions come from, as you can see in the copious footnotes, from scholarship and studies that have shown that these are ways that that folks have used in the past to assess effectiveness of trainings. And then generally, we also have a section called Guidance to Support Law Enforcement Agencies. We want to highlight the fact that POST does have the ability, if it wanted to do so, to issue law enforcement guidance to different law enforcement agencies in the same way that the California Department of Justice's Division of Law Enforcement issues law enforcement bulletins to law enforcement agencies throughout the state. And we provide some suggestions, and again, these are suggestions to POST on some guidance that it could issue to encourage law enforcement agencies, for example, to engage in rigorous trainer selection and vetting so that facilitators have cultural competency, subject matter expertise, and credibility with newly assigned officers. It could issue guidance to ensure instructors are trained in adult learning theory and capable of facilitating dialogue on race, identity, and trauma-informed approaches. Guidance on how to evaluate facilitators through anonymous participant feedback and periodic peer observation. How to normalize accountability by establishing clear expectations for behavior aligned with racial and identity profiling trainings, and by communicating consequences for violations. And again, these are just some of the potential topics for guidance that it could issue. And this is a way to address, again, the concerns that the RIPA board has vocalized in the past in terms of ensuring that these trainings, that POST is measuring the effectiveness of these trainings in some way. And providing law enforcement agencies with suggestions and potential tools in order to do so. And under the section on AB 443 in the workshop, a couple of our RIPA board members and Cal DOJ staff participated in that workshop earlier this year. in March. And again, the purpose of this workshop was to develop a definition of biased conduct that would be used during pre-employment background investigations and any investigation related to a bias-related complaint or incident that is filed with the agency. And the group of 15 subject matter experts that was assembled in Sacramento developed a particular definition, and it's highlighted in the report in italics. And on June 4th, the Post Commission decided to adopt or to vote on two potential definitions, one that strictly followed the statutory framework, and then the second option followed more closely the definition that the subject matter experts issued or developed together during that workshop. And ultimately, the Post Commission decided to adopt the definition that more closely followed the statutory language. And in the report, we talk about the limited discussion that the Post Commission engaged in terms of why it decided to pick that option A over option B. It really turned on adding the word in action and adding the word in action and adding the word off duty. It included concerns related to the fact that law enforcement does not always have a duty to act. And without that context, adding the word in action to the biased conduct definition could potentially lead to mislabeling inaction and linking it to bias. That said, in the report, we note that while the board is disappointed to learn that Post did not adopt the language and definition developed by the subject matter experts, it's hopeful that the revamped pre-employment background investigations that involve bias assessments will help law enforcement demonstrate due diligence in preventing biased conduct. And it hopes that it also helps with consistency and transparency in internal affairs investigations involving allegations of biased conduct. And then we get into the field training program and the first review, an overview of the field training program materials as the consultants discussed earlier today, the role of the FTO, supervisor, administrator, coordinator, and then some of the field training research that was conducted in this initial year, and then an overview of the second year review of the field training program, in which the consultants and the DOJ team will be looking at what values does the field training program teach, and do they align with the goals of AB 953? How well do the FTP materials cover potential for bias and racial and identity profiling? And how well do the FTP materials and training align with Academy Training LD3, Principled Policing in the Community, or LD42, Cultural Diversity Discrimination? And that is a general overview of the chapter.
Thank you so much, Marisol. Apologies, I am having some technical issues, and so while I am on camera on my laptop, the audio is actually extremely difficult to make out. So I'm joining by phone for audio. So I apologize. Hopefully there's no echo. But I wanted to open it up for questions, as well as any comments or feedback. And Ronnie, I may ask you, I can see board member Sierra's hand up, but if I do have trouble or you hear a silence, I'll ask you, Ronnie, to take over. Board member Sierra?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Marisol. This is really helpful. And I think we are presenting a really great roadmap here of the work we've been doing recently on these really very specific topics related to RIPA, as well as where we're going for the next year. So I really think that it gives a really good presentation. One comment I had with respect to the area in which we are providing suggestions how posts may be able to either assist local law enforcement agencies in measuring effectiveness of their employees once they've been completed the training, is to the extent that some of those suggestions may be mirroring activities that Post is doing already, and we may have documented this in the past. For example, standards that they do have with respect to who is providing the training or any evaluations that are made or testing. I think it would be important, if we don't already have it in this chapter, to either cross-reference that or to incorporate that. Because they may not completely align with the suggestions, but there may be some overlap with what is already being done. So I think that would be important to acknowledge and think about. Oh, excuse me. And also, I just think this is a great area in the continuing years that we are working on this, to be working with Post and trying to explore this area and find creative ways. Because I think we all agree that effectiveness, trying to figure out and measure effectiveness, is really critical. But it's a challenging issue. That's all I have. But thank you very much for your work on this.
Thank you, Board Member Sierra. Others with questions or comments?
I forgot. May I ask where we? Oh, sorry.
I will take this opportunity to ask a couple questions, comments or questions. One is about, so a number of us were at the October training, and one thing that was made clear is there's actually quite a bit of confusion even among training staff about RIPA and about the anonymity piece and the fact that the data is provided to us in the aggregate. A number of the individuals at this particular training is subject matter expert training. Again, last October or November, there seemed to be a general belief that we at RIPA get information about each and every officer, each and every stop, and each and every report that is being made. So I wonder if there is some opportunity in either this report or the next one to find a way for Post to convey accurate information about RIPA, given this broad misconception. So that's number one. And then number two, at our last RIPA board meeting, general board meeting, many of us had questions and concerns about what were the ICE raids in Los Angeles. And we had expressed a desire for this year's report to include something related to those ICE raids and about the fear they cause, the concern, the multiple impacts on immigrant communities, how it also can impact workforce, other things. So I also wonder, and perhaps this might be for next year's report, to talk about what information Post needs to convey related to cooperation with ICE. There are a number of ICE activities that have been reported by mainstream media, as well as many anecdotes shared about how things like accents, skin color, other things that definitely indicate bias, how those are being used on the regular by ICE agents in abducting individuals from our communities. So I think if we're trying to get at race and identity bias, it would be important to remind people, officers through the trainings that, what cooperation, I mean, largely through statute, it is not allowed, and to remind them of that. And again, to include separate information about what ICE is doing. And I know that it does not involve specific California agencies, but to think about the impact on our communities in California. Thanks. Ronnie, I have now lost access to be able to see people raising their hands. Can you take over? Thank you.
Yes. If anybody raises their hand, I'll make sure to call on them. And I mean, with that, does anybody else want to give any comments, have any questions in regards to the draft section of the report for our subcommittee?
I had a question.
Yeah, just wanted to follow up on Manju. I think, just following up on that topic, since we are having a board meeting coming up that we're going to be devoting to the issue of immigration, I think what I would suggest is we kind of table where we're addressing this issue. And maybe having a standalone section in the beginning. We may decide as a board how we want to address this. But I think that's, a very important point. It's about, this California Values Act, and, how local law enforcement, California, mandate around the limitations with respect to a cooperation. But since we're having a full board meeting with respect to that issue, I think that we should just right now, I would suggest kind of table how we are incorporating into that report as a whole, whether it's going to be individual sections or maybe a section in the beginning of the report. I think we're still, as a board, still going to have to work through that.
Thank you. And I agree. That's a really strong suggestion. And certainly I would myself recommend having a standalone section to raise some of these issues. Are there other comments, questions? I do see a member of the public, and I just wanted to say, I believe, Dove, that we'll have public comment after we finish with the report. So unless at this point we are just taking questions and comments from our board members.
I guess I'll jump in and give just like a general comment, and I hope I can have some concrete recommendations that make sense. Taking notes on the call, so trying to piece it all together in my head. But I mean, first and foremost, thank you to everybody on the team that's been working on this section of the report. So far, what I've looked at looks amazing. Thank you to the consultants as well. And I guess, I think for me, there's a little bit of concern in the sense of like FTOs and FTP programming or field training programming. I think for me, it's just like some things that have come up during the conversation is that, I've heard law enforcement officers in some of these spaces talk about how the FTO kind of does shape and inform them on how they're going to survive within our communities, right, within the streets. And sometimes the rhetoric, or at least like what's conveyed to them is like, hey, forget everything you just learned because it's going to get you killed. I'm going to teach you how to survive, in these streets, right, in this community, or how to approach these problems in these situations. So that's like the first thing that kind of comes to mind when I think about FTOs and kind of the work that's done on the ground, right? Because that can undo a lot of the work that has been done in academy leading up to them becoming law enforcement officers within our community. So that's just like the first thing that kind of comes to mind there. And, I understand that like that's probably where the culture is really shaped, right? Within that environment. You have these young cadets coming out of the academy. They want to fit into, their department, and they want to not be excluded or be outliers in that sense, right? So, that can quickly turn into someone falling into line and then becoming complicit, right? And learning those implicit and explicit biases. So that's just something that I do want to flag there. Just general comment about that. And I know that like Post has limitations, right? In their authority, in their purview, what they can and can't do, right? And I know that when we've all come together and tried to craft language, it can be a pain in the butt, right? We disagree on a word, we disagree on a general meaning or its implication or how it's implemented, et cetera, right? We've had those conversations. We've spent hours kind of deliberating, going back and forth, right? Just to finalize some language that then ultimately doesn't get picked up by like the Post Commission or isn't used in its entirety, right? So another thing that I understand there where we have some limitations as a board and kind of some of the obstacles that we have to overcome. But I guess in terms of, some concrete, I guess, recommendations, or at least what's coming to mind, I am assuming that we're going to be able to continue to work with the consultants, right? And I think with the consultants, what I want to see is building more evaluation tools that we can give to Post that can be made available to agencies, right? And on top of that, making sure that, I know Post, already, sets like the minimum standards for selecting and training FTOs. But how can we, on top of that, right? Urging Post and agencies alike to not only meet that minimum, but to exceed that, right? Because the minimum is the lowest bar you can meet. And I think that's important. We have to put some more effort in ensuring the people that are chosen as FTOs are reinforcing and not undermining what's being taught within the academy. And the last one, I think I sound like a broken, well, not the last one. I got one more after this. It might sound like a broken record, and I'm going to keep saying it, right? It's like structured community feedback loops. We need community feedback loops. We have to have community involvement. I appreciate, them bringing subject matter experts to the last in-person meeting. But from what I read, it was largely law enforcement, right, background. It wasn't really community-based members or people that represent the community, right? The demographics that ultimately end up being the statistics on the other side of the reports and the papers that we're reading. And the last one, I guess just this is for like DOJ, just for the report. Can we just have like a brief reminder somewhere in the report where it's like, this year we put up this many recommendations, this many were, not applicable, this many were out of their scope, this many went forward, here was what happened with these recommendations. Because I think it's also important for us to kind of document over the years all the recommendations we've put forth and like the actionable next steps that have happened, like the good that's come out of them. And also so that we don't forget, right, like where we've been at as a board. Because I feel like sometimes I get these reports and I get these sections and I focus in on our sections or what we're talking about. But sometimes it's good for me to actually sit and remind myself, like, all right, this is where we started at, right? And we've come this far in this journey and in this collaboration and relationship with Post. So those are just the things that come to mind as, we've had this conversation. And if anybody else has any comments, questions, or feedback, I'm open to it. Thank you.
Other questions, comments, feedback? Oh, here we have one. Board Member Menson.
Yeah, Ronaldo, you brought up some really good things, and obviously the specifically to talk about the field training officer program. I can't talk about all the 500 plus law enforcement agencies throughout California, but I know obviously with mine, the FTO program, what it is today compared to what it was like when I went through, and yeah, it was prevalent as when you get in the car the first day, forget everything you learned in the police academy because I'm going to teach you really how it's done, and that did take place. I will say now the FTO program has been, I mean, there's been a significant amount of different modules that have been included in it. It's been a lot more structured than what it was in the years past. And and I think someone else mentioned it, the field training officer is who's the teacher, is how critical that role is. Because yes, if you have issues, if you have biases with that person, is it easily that could be passed down to the trainee, and it could. So I can only speak on behalf of my organization, my department. The selection of those field training officers is one of the biggest selections in the process that we go through to selecting them, for a wide range of things, from the technical skill to their interaction with the community. And it's a very big decision on who we pick, because they're training our officers for really for the years to come. So, but yeah, you brought up some good points.
Thank you, Board Member Menson. Other questions, comments, feedback?
I just want to respond. Well, first, thank
Please.
everyone so far who has commented. I wanted to respond to Board Member Villeda's comments in terms of, that you brought up concerns related to the impact that the FTP program, the field training program, can have on the culture of different, law enforcement agencies. That's certainly something that the consultants are looking at, particularly for the second year review, and doing, research on not just other, U.S. models, but also even looking at potentially international models to see what other folks are doing that can inform the RIPA Board's recommendations, potential recommendations, and best practices for the following year. And in terms of the feedback loops, thank you for raising that, because it is something that other board members, it's a concern that has come up in the past with, these workshops where board members are invited to, and the lack of community input is real and felt. So that's definitely something that we wanted to raise in this chapter. And in terms of the recommendations that the RIPA Board has made in the past, I appreciate the comment that sometimes it's difficult to keep track of, what did the RIPA Board recommend 3 years ago? What did it recommend last year? Is that something that I'm guessing, and I want to make sure that I'm making the right assumption, that it's something that the subcommittee would like to have access to, but not necessarily want to be part of the actual written report?
I mean, I guess for me, it's more of a transparency thing, right? Like, I would also want the general public that does read this report, even though it might not be a lot of people that read it, but it gets read, to also see, right? Like, this is what we've been doing internally over the years to kind of push our recommendations, and what's transpiring with those recommendations as we do this work over the years. But also, I guess for myself, it would just be great to have that as a reference.
Thank you.
I can say for myself, probably my preference would be to keep it as an internal document for tracking purposes. And then, continue to do what we've been doing in terms of the report. I think sometimes, when you're in negotiations with other, those like posts, we are seeking cooperation and collaboration. And so I think, the tracking is the most helpful in terms of knowing what we want to recommend in the future. I think there are other ways that we, seek accountability, and then we seek that cooperation. And part of that is, our two RIPA co-chairs going to the post meeting tomorrow, things like that. So I just would want to make sure that we're not impeding those efforts. And so I think finding a happy medium would be ideal. Other questions, comments, feedback? Board Member Sierra?
Yes, I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense for us internally to be looking at that, because I think every report, and I believe last year's, we may have had a pretty good full discussion of a couple of years' recommendations. I have to look back at that because, we were looking at some of them that were improved, then were implemented in the following year. So as I recall, we may have had a multi-year kind of review of some of those recommendations. But I think, you can look at each report to see, what happened to the previous year's recommendations. But having it all together just internally, I think does help us think about like where do we go from here, like for like the vision for the next report, or some issues that maybe we want to further explore. So I think it's helpful in that regard. So that, we're not being just repetitious, but maybe we're addressing whatever concern, we were trying to address in that recommendation that wasn't approved. Maybe there's another way to address it, or maybe there's some further conversations we have. So, but I do think that it would be most helpful just to make it internal, because I think the public, and we do have transparency in the fact that every report we do report on this issue. It's just, I don't know if we have one timeline from the beginning to now.
Thank you, Board Member Sierra. Other comments, questions? If not, I believe this is now the time, and DOJ, correct me if I'm wrong, to approve this section of the report draft. Is that correct, Alex, or am I wrong?
There's no need for approval. The next part of
Okay.
the agenda item is, or the next part of the agenda is public comments.
Right. Okay. So we don't have to take any action. Is that correct? As a committee before, or subcommittee before it goes to the RIPA board as a whole?
Not in terms of a formal motion or anything like that. It sounds like there's a consensus to move the draft to the full board for consideration, with some of the suggestions that we're going to try to incorporate before that draft gets sent to the full board.
Right. I know Board Member Vieta, co-chair.
Yeah, real quick before we jump into public comment, I just want to let you know, Angela, that I may go to observe tomorrow, Huntington Beach. It's just not too far for me. So just want to let you know. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank
you. Terrific. Well, before we move to public comment, I just want to say how grateful I am to the DOJ staff. Once again, another terrific section, really well written, really clear about what's needed, what we recommend, ways in which to address some of the challenges. So just want to express my appreciation for all the work that DOJ staff has done to put this together. And thank you, Marisol, for sharing that with us, and for your tremendous work and that of others. Okay, I think now we can move to public comment. And so if we could ask folks to raise their hands if they are interested in providing public comment. And you can do that by using the raise hand function, and then we'll go one by one. I believe we had some folks who were interested before in providing public comment, so. Alex, am I missing anyone?
I believe Co-Chair Kulkarni that there were some members of the public who had been in the meeting previously, and I don't see them here now. So I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, we'll give it another 30 seconds or so. After which we will move to discussion of next steps. Last call for public comment. Okay, seeing none, we will move on then to, I believe, the last item on our agenda before we adjourn, which is the discussion of next steps. Alex or others? If you could share with us what those next steps are. And I did have one question or comment during that time, please.
So in terms of next steps, I don't see any that are needing to be discussed on the agenda. I know that there was a discussion of during the subcommittee's discussion of this portion of the report, some questions about the full board meeting on immigration. And I just want to let folks know we have noticed that meeting. It is on October 9. 2025. It's taking place from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. You also can find out more information about that meeting on October 9. It's a Thursday on the RIPA meeting website. I've included a link to that in the chat. So if anybody has questions about that, either members of the public or other board members, subcommittee members, then you can find the agenda for that meeting on the website there.
Well, one question I had was if the board can receive a copy of the draft course guidelines that I believe are going to be presented at the post-commission meeting tomorrow and are on the agenda. So it would be great if we can get a copy of those guidelines, draft course guidelines.
We can provide that to the subcommittee after this meeting.
Great, thank you. Anything else? So our only next step for now appears to be the October 9th board meeting. And is it okay then to adjourn today's meeting, Alex?
If there doesn't appear to be anything else, we don't need a formal motion to adjourn as long as there's a consensus from the subcommittee to adjourn.
Great. Well, I want to just thank everyone for making time for our meeting. Thank you again to all of our amazing DOJ staff for all your work. Thank you to the members of the public who joined us today. We appreciate your time, and when you're interested in offering public comment, we are interested in that as well. So thank you to members of our post subcommittee. Appreciate all your suggestions, your questions, your comments and feedback. And for anyone on our board who's not yet a formal member of this subcommittee, we certainly encourage you to join us and look forward to seeing everyone on October 9th. With that, want to wish everyone a wonderful rest of your day and a great week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All.